Prime Video presents the Emmy Award-winning series, Fallout. Named one of the best series of 2024 by The Washington Post, Entertainment Weekly, and USA Today. Fallout is awards eligible and available for Guild members at consideramazon.com and is now streaming on Prime Video.
I'm James Burrows, and I'm not afraid to be alone with Jay Kogan.
Don't be alone with Jay Kogan.
Hi, welcome to Don't Be Alone with Jay Kogan. I'm Jay Kogan. I am your host, and I am thrilled that you're here. We have a great show for you tonight, or today. What time are you listening? This morning? We have a great show for you at 2 a.m. I don't know what you're doing or how you're listening, but we have a great show whenever you're listening. A guest, James Burrows, who is one of the preeminent directors of the multicam sitcom in the history of the multicam sitcom. And we'll talk about that in a second. But before we do, I want to encourage you to write to me at dbawjk@gmail.com with your questions, your comments, your suggestions. We have 20,000 people, 40,000 people listening to each episode of this show. And yet I get a trickle of email. I should be inundated with this crazy email. It's only me who reads it. It doesn't go through a system. You get right to me. So you can complain to me or give me compliments or whatever you want to do. Let's talk a little bit about my guest, James Burrows. James Burrows is the preeminent multi-camera director of all time. He's won a myriad of awards. He is the directing voice responsible for Cheers and Taxi and Will and Grace and Frasier and Big Bang Theory. So many TV shows you can't possibly imagine. And what is that magic? What is that thing? Of course he's talented. He's great. He comes from the theater. He knows how to block things. He knows how to keep things alive. He knows how to talk to actors. He knows how to talk to writers. He has a second sense of how all this stuff goes. So we won't be able to figure out what that is from this interview. What we'll hopefully learn today is why he does what he does and maybe get a sense of what that means to me and how I can be a little bit more like him when I direct stuff and how I can be a little bit less afraid to fail. He tries and fails things all the time. And people listen to him because he's Jim Burrows, but even stuff he says doesn't work and he moves on. I also must recommend that you read his book called Directed by James Burrows, which describes his entire history, how he became a director, who he worked with, and why his best friends are Bruce Springsteen and now Michaels, which is a very strange thing. Anyway, we'll talk to him right after this.
Don't be alone with Jay Kogan.
Jimmy Burrows, thank you for being here. This
Absolutely.
Is such a thrill to have you. I've honestly, been aware of you before I met you. And when I met you, it was fantastic. And when I saw you work, it was even more fantastic. I can only spend the first 5 minutes of the show heaping praise upon you.
Oh,
but
then I'll shut up.
Your style of directing, which I got to observe, has been very influential on me as a writer and very influential on me as the few times I've gotten to direct, which is you have a very happy set, generally speaking, if you're not working with a complete asshole. You provide merriment and joy and in the act of creation, which I think is fantastic. You're loose. You allow the actors to do what they feel like they need to do, and you worry about the technical shit later. And you keep it alive. The scenes are very alive. They are not stiff. They're not bullshitty. And that's amazing. So good on you.
Thank you.
How do you do any of that?
I don't know.
Okay. So is it?
I literally don't know.
It's instinctual.
It's instinctual.
Instinctual, yes.
I was influenced a lot by my father, who was a playwright on Broadway, and
Abe Burrows.
Abe Burrows,
the great Abe Burrows.
wrote Guys and Dolls and
Right.
Cactus Flower and 40 Carats.
It was a pretty good Nathan Detroit in high school. Just
Yeah,
just
you
saying.
were?
Just saying, yes.
You didn't have to sing much, did you?
Sue me.
Yeah.
Sue me.
That's because Sam couldn't sing. Sam Levine couldn't sing a
Right.
note, so they had to take all the songs away from him.
I consider myself a decent singer. I don't think I'm a great singer. I'm a decent singer. And when the drama teacher said, "This is a good part for you because you don't have to sing much," I went like, it was like an arrow through my heart. I could sing.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stories about Sam Levine and Frank and my dad that I
What was that like? I mean, did you see the
I
growth of it?
saw, I was trundled to rehearsals, but I was 10 years old, so
Right.
I didn't know what was going on. But I heard stories from my dad, that Sam couldn't sing a note, so
Right.
I'm sure Guys and Dolls was a song that was intended for him,
Right.
and there's a song called Traveling Light, which Frank had to cut out.
Mm.
I have, believe it or not, I have a tape of Frank Leslie singing all the Guys and Dolls songs.
Oh,
They
fantastic.
came down. But so, Sam couldn't sing a friggin' note, so even in Sue Me,
Yeah.
they had to write, call a lawyer and sue me, so he
Right.
could hit that note.
You walk up to it.
He couldn't do that.
Right.
He couldn't do that. So
That's so
all
funny.
the Nathans, in the movie,
Yeah.
Sinatra, they gave him Ever Lovin' Adelaide, which
Right.
was not in the show.
Right.
And he had a couple of other songs, but that's the history of that part.
But when you were a kid, you were also involved in the opera, right? So you were,
In the Boys Chorus of Metropolitan Opera.
yeah. So
You can tell by my and Jimmy Bocelli voice that I'm
Right.
talking to now. I have no voice. I can't sing, but I had a good falsetto.
right.
And in sixth grade, the people from the Metropolitan Opera came around to a number of sixth grade classes and said, "Can anybody sing My Country 'Tis of Thee?" So I sang it, and I was hired to be in the opera.
Right.
And I was in Carmen, and La Boheme, and Cavalleria Rusticana, and La Gioconda, and Tosca, and Boris Godunov. And we were we were urchins.
Mm-hmm.
We were urchins in Carmen. Avec la garde montante, nous arrivons, nous voilà, sonne trompette, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. That was our gig, and we were in the beginning of Carmen, so we could go home in the second act. And they paid us $3 a performance when we sang, and $2 a performance when we were supernumeraries. Just in a couple of shows, we were just kids in the street.
And you went to college on that money?
Yeah. I went to college on my dad's money.
Sure. It's good to have Abe Burrows as a dad.
Well, I think most dads.
Yes.
Yeah.
That musicality, you talk about it in the book. The musicality stays with you.
The rhythms are so important, and you can't learn the rhythms. They have to be ingrained in you. Take a pause here, don't take a pause here.
Do you think that some of those rhythms that have been put into Broadway shows and vaudeville and sitcoms now are rhythms that we all know instinctually now? We hear that music in our heads about how people talk and how, people talk on TV. And is that one of the things that people might be getting tired of, is our comedy rhythms?
No, I don't think so. I mean, everybody in comedy has to have rhythms. Even Woody had a rhythm.
Right.
And Steve Wright has a rhythm that's totally
Sure.
different. It's the rhythm that fits your personality. And no, I don't think, comedy will outlast tragedy. It just is. Dying is easy, comedy is hard. I have that pillow.
Of course.
And the rhythms of the comedy are something, again, you can't learn. That has to be just in your head.
That's disappointing to all the people who want to learn it. so I agree with you too, that you can't teach funny. You can teach form. And when I teach comedy writing, I teach form. I don't teach funny, because it's like you're either coming to class with the idea of what's funny, or I also tell people, watch more TV, like watch more movies, watch more things that are funny, and listen and observe it, and then maybe you'll find more funny in you if you study it more. But people aren't funny, it's hard.
Yeah, to be in this business, in the business I'm in, you got to be funny. You got to know what's funny. You got to know the best position to tell a joke. Do you do it over the shoulder? Do you do it walking away? Do you do it while you're bending down to pick up a package? There are a number of ways.
Right.
Sam Malone behind that bar always threw away the joke.
Right.
He was either squeezing lemons, cutting lemons, pouring beer. So that was in an action. Whereas Ratzenberger was right out there in your face, or Shelley was out there in your face.
Mm-hmm.
Teddy was, that's the character of Sam Malone. He was a laid-back guy who was capable of throwing away the joke.
One of the things, when I have this show, Don't Be Alone with Jay Kogan, I have people like you on to solve my problems. And one of the problems I have is you're willing to try a lot of things to find the right thing. I feel like I'm a failure if I have to keep trying. I want to write something. It's got to be pretty close to perfect. I'll get a revision, 2 revisions, but when I'm done, it's like I'm hoping that's it. I get stuck in the now of it, and you're willing to try and fail, try and go, not that you failed all that much, but you're willing to try. That's an amazing ability. Where does that come from?
Well, because when I get a script, I'm getting words that are sent to me, so I have to then put those in my hopper, and come out with the best way to say those words and the best action to say the words in. You as a writer go through that.
Right. By the time it gets to you.
Yes, you failed a number of times with a line
right.
until you've written it on a paper.
Right.
So you do the same thing I do.
But even after that, even after you get it, then I'm still failing because sometimes it doesn't work.
Sometimes it doesn't work.
Right.
And, if I get a line that doesn't work, I try to make it work. If I can't make it work, then I will try to come up with something else. But when the writer comes down to see the piece as he wrote it, I show it to him as he wrote it.
Right.
You have to respect the writer.
With augmentation, sometimes the writer leaves blank spaces, blank canvases. They don't talk about some blocking. They leave empty things that you have to figure out.
Yeah, they don't block the show. Yeah. They don't block.
Right.
And I don't come into a show with any preconceived notions of I don't have little match figures at home that I move
right.
around. It just is. That's my work process. You come here, you enter here, and you are there and start talking. So they start talking to one another. And I'll say, okay, you move over here, you move over there. On this joke, I think you should be on this side of him or on that side of him. So that's my process,
right?
Which you as a writer go through before you put the word on paper.
I think, and when I'm writing, I think I'm saying, okay, here's an entrance, here's an exit, here's the thing. But sometimes I'm wrong because there's no time between when I wrote that joke and the space between he leaves where he's standing and where he goes, there's a lot of time. So Yeah,
and if I can't fill that time or I can't make the joke work, I'll say, I need something else. I need some more words here.
Right.
I need a different joke here or something like that. And, I counsel writers ever since Cheers. Before Cheers, I had no cojones. Even on Taxi, that was a really difficult show for me because there was, 4 of the greatest comedy writers in the world and this interplanetary cast of actors. So, and I was green then. I didn't.
Even on Taxi?
Yeah, I was green. I had done a couple of Mary Tyler Moore's and Laverne and Shirley's, and I had known Jim and Alan. Well, Alan wasn't on. I know Jim and Ed and Stan and Dave Davis from the Mary Tyler Moore days, but I never thought I was the first choice for that show. I think they probably went to Bogart, and they probably went to Jay Sandridge, and then they went to me. So I was green there, and it was a really hard show. It was the first time 4 film cameras were used on a sitcom. Mm-hmm. All of MTM was done with three cameras. I used 4 cameras because the set was so big, and the cast was so big. So it was important to me to capture the joke the first time it was said in front of an audience.
I can't imagine directing a show with 3 cameras, honestly. Having done it, honestly, it was like, I think that you're always, who's covering the cross? Who's any of that stuff?
Well, look at you'll see it on Laverne and Shirley or Happy Days. There were all 3 cameras. There were a lot of pickups and a lot of 2 shots.
Right.
And so, but anyway, Taxi was a really hard show for me. And once Cheers hit, then I got some balls, and then I could, I did Night Court with Riney. I did that pilot, I had a great time on. And I started to, get this reputation as a man who knew what he was doing. I forgot the original. What was your original question about that? You forgot it too because you didn't write it down.
I don't write these things down at all. Prime Video presents The Boys, starring Anthony Starr and Carl Urban. The series' biggest strength is simply its boldness, says the New York Times. It does not attempt a textbook definition of fascism. It just plunges its fist through your chest and trusts that you'll get the point. The drama series remains a forward-thinking affair that has its crimson-stained finger on the pulse of our present dysfunctional American reality, says Daily Beast. The Boys is awards eligible for Guild members at consideramazon.com and is streaming right now on Prime Video. Watch it.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
Was it hard to direct people like Andy Kaufman, who seemed like not naturally an actor and also maybe a little crazy?
Andy was an amazing human being. He was a rich Jewish kid from Great Neck, Long Island, who decided to go into the performance art business.
Right.
He was not a comic. He was a performance artist. And the boys, Jim and Dave and Stan and Ed, saw Andy and wanted him to play the mechanic because of his character, Foreign Man.
Right.
So they hired him. And one of the stipulations when they hired him was that he could be his alter ego in an episode.
Tony Clifton.
Tony Clifton.
Yeah.
But Andy was, in rehearsal, he was fine. He had a photographic memory. He also had day-night reversal because he worked late nights on comedy, and it was a busboy at Greenblatt's.
Right.
So Andy would come in after 1 o'clock, after the lunch break. He would come in and, we would rehearse the scenes, and it was fine. The show got done and everything like that. So the audience loved him, and other than the Tony Clifton debacle.
Right. Do you think he wanted to be fired? Like that was the goal?
Oh, yeah. It was performance art.
Yeah. But only for you guys. The performance was for you on the stage.
It got all over the press and everything like that. And it was, that's how Andy lived. He loved that. Yeah. I spent a few nights with him and his girlfriend and my first wife, and he's a sweet, calm kid who, but he had that mind, right, that he wanted to fuck with people. Well,
he did so well that nobody believed he was dead.
Yeah.
When he died. people are still thinking that it's a gag. But Andy was fantastic. You have, reading your book, which is, everybody should read it. I think it's fantastic. You have spectacular memory. I mean, you've written down everything, like all the names and all the shows and all the people. I don't remember who I talked to today, let alone you're giving me names from 40 years ago for people. Is that just an ability that you have, this great memory?
I have a good memory. It's not as good as my friend Al Michaels, who has an idiotic memory. Is that the word? The ones that we can recall, like Mary Lou Henner.
Yes.
Had that she could say.
Right. I met you at this date or this time.
And what day of the week it was.
Yeah, she's told me that. I've met her once, and she's told me when I met her.
Now, and so how do you check it?
I couldn't. She said, you had a broken leg. I said, I've never had a broken leg. And then she said, no, you had a broken leg. I said, I don't remember. And then I thought about it, and I thought, I did have a sprained ankle once, so maybe that was it. But I'm sure she's right, and I'm wrong.
I'm good with that. I'm getting up there. I'm going to be 35 next year, so I'm getting up with,
right.
It all doesn't, come back to me as much as it used to. But I did a lot of research for that book. I had a great co-writer. He wrote most of the book. Eddie Friedfeld is a big sitcom fan. He wrote the Sid Caesar book, and he wrote the Mel Brooks book. So, well, Eddie was a big help to me.
Unless he had the details of your life, I think you probably helped him.
I did, but I can remember stuff.
You remembered this. I was on the set of News Radio. I worked in News Radio for a couple of weeks, but I came back to visit News Radio, and during a take walked into the studio, and I think I've tripped over something, like tripped over a cable, and I ruined a take. In the middle, I made a bump noise. And then you stopped and he said, is that Jake Hogan? You called me out in the middle of a thing. We didn't know each other all that well. You remembered my name. I was honored and humiliated at the same time. That you remembered my name and humiliated me at the same time.
I don't remember that.
Well, I do. It was fantastic. Oh, my God. We were talking about this before we started up. The pilot of Frasier, one of the great pilots of all time, because they took a great character who was beloved on Cheers, and then morphed him a little bit, just a little bit, to be more reasonable, to be a little bit less cartoony, a little bit more three-dimensional, and gave him a brother who is equally as cartoony and one-dimensional as the character who was on Cheers. So he seemed, by comparison, to be a little bit more, regular guy-ish. So genius, so smart. And to have the main issue between highfalutin Frasier and his low-down dad be, at odds with each other, but forced to be together. Fantastic.
Yeah, it was a great show. Angel Casey and Lee wrote a great pilot. I had nothing to do with that pilot. Neither did the Charles brothers. The boys came to us and said they want to spin Kelsey off. We said, go with our blessing. They wrote that entire script. They deserve all the credit for it. They wrote a wonderful script. They created wonderful characters that lasted 11 years.
You created a character on that show. The chair.
Yes.
Martin's chair.
Yes.
Is probably in the Smithsonian, I assume. Honestly, I just assume that it's in the Smithsonian. It's this ratty old chair with tape on it.
Duct tape.
Yeah.
I'd put duct tape on.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think it's so emblematic of who that character is and the conflict of their struggle. Like, it's right in the center of the living room, what Frasier's conflict is.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether Martin's there or not.
Right.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's genius. Do you do that for every show? Do you try to find a physicalization of what you think the show's about, or something that breathes the character, the main character to life? Do it all the time, or just when you think it needs a little?
I try to enhance. I think you could probably call me an enhancer. I can take an average script and make it good with smoke and mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a lot of pilots that got on the air that way.
Right.
Through, my machinations of, zooming it up and making it, it can't go past episode 3.
Mm-hmm. But there's that thing that happens, whether shows have to congeal in a way. They have to have a great script, can be a great script, but it's not necessarily a great show until a cast is gotten and put together and there's some sort of chemistry there.
The shows that have turned into big hits for me were all incredibly well-written shows. Great writers, and we were lucky enough to cast them well. I talk about this, I think, in the book, to say that in 1994, when I was sent a Friends script, I think I was sent it in February. I went with, I met with Marta and David, because in those days, this was after Cheers. In those days, the writers would think they were auditioning me.
Right.
No, I was auditioning the writers.
Yeah.
Same with Max and David
Mm-hmm.
on Will and Grace. Because I want to know that a writer can defend his material, not be defensive about his material.
Right.
So,
So meaning that they'll listen to other creative voices.
Or say, I'll say this, and they'll say, no, we have this in there for this reason. Not say to me, no, we like it.
Right.
Just do it. So I read the Friends script, and I said to Broder, my agent, he's so powerful he only has one name. I said...
He has a brother.
Yes, he does.
Right.
I said, I got to do the script.
Right.
So I did it I did 4 pilots that year. It was the 4th pilot I did. I worked on the weekends to do it. And it was the last pilot done in 1994, and those 6 people were available.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic.
So...
And sort of available. Some were still attached to other shows, sort of.
Yeah, but you want to talk about luck.
Yeah.
That's casting. A lot of casting is luck, about people being available at the right. The Martin and David wrote that part for Schwimmer, and I had done the pilot of Monty with Henry and I think Mark Lawrence wrote it. Henry and Kate Burton and Schwimmer and Schwimmer and David Krumholtz.
Right.
Young Krumholtz,
Mm-hmm.
before he was sexy.
Yeah, sure.
And he's even sexy with that nose.
Right.
It's crazy. So he was, talk about a heat-seeking missile for a joke. Krumholtz was that way.
Yeah.
And I knew, and Martin and David wanted him, and David Schwimmer was queasy. And so I called him and I said, oh, this is a really, really good part. So he got on board, and they cast Lisa and Courtney, and Jen was in another show,
Right.
muddling through. So Moonves, when he was running Warner Brothers, had to talk Sagansky out of Jennifer Aniston. I don't know how he did that.
Right.
And LeBlanc was available, and that was, and Matt Perry, and that was, you
Matt
know,
Perry had that airport.
yeah, 2020.
Yeah.
20,
20,
yeah,
some futuristic airport thing that made no sense. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible. Even from the description of the show, you know it's terrible. So it's like, could he jump off of that to it? Yes, he would want to.
Well, they didn't pick it up,
Yeah.
but Jen's show was running. It was on the air.
Yeah.
That
was that's amazing.
And I don't know how Moonves got.
My wife, Brown Mandel, who is a writer who you worked with on some shows, was working on Friends at the time that began, and she came up with the name Central Perk.
Oh,
That's her.
really?
Yeah, that's her.
Wow.
And you know what she gets for that?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nada.
Just the joy of knowing she created something in the culture that kids still watch.
You can tell Brown that 98% of what was written on the page when it was sent to me ended up on the screen.
Yeah. Well,
That's how genius that script was.
she worked with you on another show where that was not true. It was called Men Behaving Badly.
Oh, no. Oh, Jay, I thought I gave you $200 not to mention that.
Yeah, well, that was a terrible experience for just about everybody
Oh, my
involved
God.
in that show.
I had watched the English version of the show,
yeah,
which was brilliant.
yeah.
And then when Tom and Marcy cast Rob Schneider, that show just went out the window.
Sure. And didn't anybody flag it and just say there's a problem?
Tom and Marcy were kings then.
Yeah, I know, but
You know what I mean?
Well, and they had worked with Roseanne. I guess they had worked with difficult people before
Yeah.
and figured, oh, we'll worry about it later.
But that was not the issue. The issue was you needed two of the most innocent actors in the world to play that part. And Rob doesn't,
Right.
Rob is sinister.
Right.
And there's
That's right.
There's a dark side to him when he opens his mouth,
This is true.
So but I mean, he's used it, he's done well with it. And
I guess so. I mean, to me, it's one of those things where you grow up in show business and you see how to be in show business. You sort of have to try to be nice to people along the way. You don't know where you're going to land. You don't know what's going to. There's that kind of person, and then there's this sort of person who thinks they got to fight their way through everything to get where they're going. And it's like I don't. That seems like a much harder choice.
I know.
And I think that's what Rob thinks show business was.
Do you
At least
think
he
it's a
used to.
choice?
Well, it's built into the personality,
Yeah.
but for sure, I think it's a power move. It's sort of the thing that's like, nobody's going to kick me around, as opposed to this is a creative business. Let's figure out how to work this thing together. So I don't know. Let's talk. Why do you think sitcoms are at a little bit of a lull right now? What aren't the networks seeing that, or the streamers, or I don't think has a sitcom ever been successful, a multicam sitcom successful on a streamer? I can't think of one.
Well, hopefully Mid-Century Modern will be
Okay,
the one I just did.
that's for
pilot.
a streamer.
That's Max and David,
Right.
Nathan Lane, Matt Bomer, Linda Levin, and a guy named Nathan Lee Graham. 3 queens in the desert and a mother.
Right.
It's really funny.
What streamer is it for? Do we
Hulu.
Hulu? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But I think I was offered 2 or 3 pilots in this last session. So I think they're making a comeback. Hopefully, I attended the funeral of the sitcom a number of times.
Yes.
And it's always seemed to come back. But I think they're making, Damon Wayans and his kid have a sitcom
Right.
coming out. And I was sent a couple of sitcoms. They were not my speed. But I think there may be a renaissance happening.
I hope so. I mean, there's something really special about, live theater that feels that sitcoms are as close to as we get when you're at home. The audience is there. You're doing the proscenium. It feels like it's theater a little bit, and that's great. That's a different vibe than movies.
Right.
And there's, even when we're at home watching this thing, we're part of that audience. We're part of that audience. I don't know that we're always laughing out loud the way they are on TV, but occasionally. But we're getting the sense of what's live, what's funny, and falling in love with those characters in a different way. I really do think that you fall in love with sitcom characters in a different way than you fall in love with multicam characters.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to drop this show. Well, they'll drop it all in 10 episodes at once, or they'll do it week to...
Hulu releases Only Murders in the Building, one every week.
Well, hopefully, maybe they'll do that.
I hope so too, because the appointment with the show is kind of important too, right? I mean, if it was my show, I'd want it to not be released all at the same time and be forgettable. I'd want it to be every week there's a new one, and then when it's over, people go, "Oh, I'm sad that experience is over, and can't wait for season 2."
I think it's really important in a comedy,
yeah,
that you drop it once a week, because a half-hour sitcom is perfect. 45-minute sitcom, not
right.
as good,
Yeah.
Not as interesting. You get a little tired. Half-hour sitcom, so hopefully they'll release it one a week.
Don't be alone with Jake Hogan.
Lisa Kudrow told me that when she was working on The Comeback, that you mentioned in the book that you're good friends with Bruce Springsteen. Al Michaels and Bruce Springsteen are your two best friends. How did that happen?
Bruce Springsteen happened through horses, and Al happened through golf.
All right. So, she told me that Bruce told you that he was afraid he's Valerie Cherish. That there was a moment in time when he was afraid that people were looking at him the way Valerie Cherish was trying to make a comeback, and people weren't perceiving her as a value.
I don't remember that. He might have said that. He's incredibly smart, erudite man that you would not expect out of a rock musician.
Yeah, well, I saw his show, and the Broadway show.
Oh my God,
fantastic!
But you go, you sit in a room with him, and it's just, he's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I don't get to sit in a room with him, but I get to watch his stuff and listen to his music.
Well, I'm fascinating, so I make up.
Yeah, okay, that's true. But yeah, I can imagine that his music's deep. His awareness of who he is and the character he plays is fascinating and revealed in his one-man show and his book. I mean, for people my age who grew up with Bruce Springsteen songs, thinking, "Yeah, I'm gonna hop on a motorcycle and get away from here someday," to hear him talk about that as a character is just genius.
Yeah.
Amazing.
He's an amazing human being.
Yeah.
But
the thing that struck me about Lisa telling me this is that even Bruce Springsteen has the insecurity of feeling like, well, maybe I'm not still good, or maybe I'm not still there. It makes me feel good as an insecure writer, actor, director, whatever I am, that even Bruce Springsteen is insecure sometimes. That makes me feel good. It's completely unjustified.
I had a really good time on The Comeback. It's something literally, Michael Patrick King sent me the script, and I read it and said, I can't direct this. He said, I don't want you to direct it. I want you to play Jimmy the director.
Right. You love actors, and you're always sympathetic to actors, but did anything about that experience give you even more empathy or something, more insight into what it is they do? I mean, I feel like you know this instinctually anyway.
I did. I was trained in the theater. I'm a theater rat, so I know what an actor goes through. So I've always been sympathetic to an actor. And it really helped me in my career, because it's the multi-camera sitcom is a writer's medium.
Yeah.
It's a writer's medium. You guys write the show, you do the titles, you produce the show, you cast the show, you do the scenic design, you do everything.
That's why we like it.
I know.
It gets to be what we want it to be.
But, so over the years, I've become a great defender of the actor. Mm-hmm. Because if I can have an actor feel not like they're parroting words, but they're empowered to create, they're going to be better actors.
Well, I think it's true, even as a writer, I have to admit, I think it's true that the actor who plays a character on a show, certainly after a couple seasons, knows that character better than the writers. That they've gone through a lot of thinking about what a character would and would not do. And it's always very painful when you have a great joke and an actor comes to you and says, my character wouldn't say this. My character wouldn't. Jane Leeves did this to us on Frasier. I forget what the joke was, but it knocked down the table read. We were just like, oh, we were throwing roses in the air. It was fantastic. And then she came back quietly and says, you know, she wouldn't say this. And we went, what do you mean she wouldn't say? We just did. No, my character wouldn't say that. And we had to cut it out because she had possession. David Hyde Pierce had possession of his character. He knew his character well enough, better than we did. And we had to listen.
That's in a successful show. In a show that's just fledgling and starting out, there are a lot of writers who say, do it my way.
Right.
You know, the actors have to do it my way.
Well, I think everybody's figuring out who those characters are as we're going.
Yeah, but if you hire me on the show,
Mm-hmm.
I'm the great equator.
Okay.
You know, I say to the writers, we did it your way. Here, we have an interpretation of doing it this way. And even if the interpretation is way off or something like that, at least the actor feels empowered that they're part of the creative process.
Yeah.
Because on most sitcoms, do it as I wrote it.
That's not a collaborative.
No, but that goes on.
I guess so. Not on the best shows, I don't think, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know. Not on my shows.
Well, that's good. Your shows are the best shows.
I don't allow it. So I do an audience run through.
Yes.
Before I ever shoot the show.
Yes, that's very unusual.
Which is through the roof.
Right.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know.
So that is on day 4. Day 4, you bring an audience in, and we run the show for that audience, not cameras, just for the audience.
Yeah.
And not many people do that. That's something only
I always do that.
Yeah.
I always do that because then I know, and it's the time I bring the network in the studio in,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't bring them in before when we rehearse with the writers, because if there's no audience, the network in the studio is going to judge what's funny.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
If they knew what was funny, they'd have nothing but hits on the air.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that was through the roof, like
Yeah.
Cheers was, like Taxi was, like Frasier was, like Friends was, and Will and Grace. And so.
Does any company ever balk at the expense of bringing an audience?
Not when I do the show. Okay. That's one of the things.
It's in the contract.
No, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
You do. This is what you do.
Yeah.
Because it costs you an extra $100,000, but you know right away whether you got to change the script or not change the script.
Right.
You know, all writers think their jokes are funny.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is a way to tell whether they are or not.
I can get you an audience for $20,000. So if next time they say $100,000, come to me. I'll take 50, and then we'll split the difference.
Well, you got to pay for the camera and the
right.
grips and the dollies and everything like that. So,
well, this has been amazing. I think it's time for question time.
It's question time.
We have jingles for everything.
How much did that cost you?
Free.
Free?
Yes.
Who sang it?
My kid.
Really?
Yeah.
You got your kid on the payroll?
The free payroll. Everything about this.
The Kohan family?
Yeah, the Kohan. Everything about this podcast is about me not losing money. So I'm not gaining money, but it's about me not losing money. So that's what it is. So I asked some people. I have Jimmy coming on. What questions would you ask? So there's people gave some really interesting questions. We've answered some of them already. One of them is very interesting to me. Is like, how do you make a sneeze funny?
It depends on the sneezee.
Okay. Megan Mullally.
Yeah, she would make it funny.
You wouldn't have to tell her. She would know.
No. I mean, you know, everything's a derivative of one joke. I'm sure that was told back in Greek time.
So it's just finding new ways to do something
that
maybe we've seen before.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Is it, having done it for so long, what's the hardest thing to do now that you think you've done too many times?
Oh, wow. Crying.
Yeah.
Funny crying.
Crying is to sad.
Yeah. Kirsty was a great funny crier. Oh my God. And the character cried all the time. I mean, it was insane. She always got dumped by men, and it was just, she was insanely funny with that.
Jeff Greenstein.
Oh, no.
Yes, he says, what does a yellow light mean?
Oh, God. Okay, that's tied for the funniest joke I ever did. I didn't write that joke.
Okay.
The Charles brothers wrote that joke.
Okay.
Literally, I went back to New York with a couple of taxi scripts because I had to go see my parents. And I got to Reverend Jim at Space Odyssey, which is when he takes the driving test.
Yeah.
And I read that, you know, but even before the driving test, it's hysterical. You know, because he's got his application. He says eyes. She said, don't put two. So I got to that script, that joke, and I started laughing so hard that the stewardess came over and said, sir, are you all right? So when we did it in front of the audience. I think the laugh went on for 45 seconds. And the four of them who had to react to Reverend Jim kept having to find new ways to say slow down. And Chris Lloyd, the actor, had to find new ways of saying what does the yellow light mean. So tell Greenstein, that's the answer.
What's the most common note you give an actor most of the time?
Don't push.
Don't push. What about faster?
Writers give the faster note. I say don't push, especially if you have because we have an audience, and if
Right.
the audience isn't reacting the way I know it should react, I say to the actor, don't push, because if we get that on film and we put it on the air, you're going to be pushing in a living room, and
Right.
it doesn't look good. So please don't push.
Isn't it frustrating that sometimes you block a scene and you stage it, and there's a laugh, and that laugh is so big it covers the next line, which is also a joke, and it's like, and you hope that maybe they'll hear it on a second pass or something like that.
I go ba 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 ba. That's what I do.
Okay.
I rescue.
Okay.
I'm a director rescuer. If an actor on the way to a joke screws up the line, you'll hear me go ba 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 ba. Because I don't want the audience to hear.
Right. So you stop the actor from speaking.
Oh yeah, screwing up the joke.
That's fantastic.
Because laughter is 90% surprise.
Right.
So if the audience hears the joke the wrong way, now they're not going to laugh at it the right way.
I guess, although audiences are pretty good about laughing again the second time around.
Well, a lot of times we change a joke the second time around.
That's true too, and they love it. But that's unfair. I think that's cheating. Like if you do a scene and you give a second pass a brand new line, I think the audience is automatically going to laugh at it because they're surprised, not because it's necessarily a better joke.
Maybe, but a lot of times those second pass jokes don't end up in the script.
Right. It's a nervous tick that
Yeah.
we're afraid of something and we put them in. Like, well, have you worked on shit? There must be a million alts on Will and Grace. Or
Oh
something.
my God.
So like, do you ever get sick of it? It's like, come on, guys, we got it.
If they take too long,
Yeah.
I'll say, my graveling. I'll say no. That's enough.
Jake Hogan show does not have a million alts. You know why? I'm too lazy to write a million alts. If we have something that's good, that should be good enough.
I respect those writers that they can sit in a room.
Me too.
And come up with alts.
Which successful show surprised you most?
That it became a success?
Yeah.
I think Big Bang.
Oh, interesting. Didn't they do the pilot many times?
We did it twice.
Yeah. You just thought these characters are too silly? Like,
That's Chuck's genius.
yeah.
Whatever he did. I remember he used to tell me, nobody understands what Jim Parsons is saying, but they understand the intent.
Yeah.
So Chuck was a genius with that. I can't believe, if you go to Europe, how many people say, I love that show.
Some people like it here in the United States too.
I know. I know. I just, I did the pilot twice. They greatly improved the second. It's a tribute to Chuck, that show, and Bill Prady.
Did your dad live to see your success?
He came out to see me do a Tony Randall show. I did when Tony Randall played the
He
judge.
was the judge, yeah.
He never saw a taxi. He never saw that. He died in 1985. In 1982, he watched Cheers. He would watch Cheers. He had dementia,
Mm-hmm.
but he would watch Cheers. He called me.
Yeah.
I said after the couple of shows, I said to Dad, the first year, I said, "What do you think?" And he said, "I wish the bartender had more dirt under his fingernails."
Interesting.
Because he was right.
Yeah.
He was,
Yeah.
Teddy
That was
was,
insightful.
Teddy was a farceur from Carnegie Mellon.
Sure. Yeah.
And in fact, we hired Fred Dreyer, who was one of the finalists for Sam Malone, to be on Taxi,
Right.
to play a sportscaster. And I said to Teddy, we hired him for one reason: watch him.
So you be more like him. Yeah.
Be more like him.
Yeah.
Watch him grab his groin.
Right.
Watch how he's a peacock.
Mhm.
Watch how he rubs up against Shelley.
Yeah.
That's who Sam Malone is.
Right. He got it.
So I'm sad that he didn't really see my success.
Yeah.
He died in 85 when he was 75 years old. My mom did,
Yeah.
but my dad didn't.
Well, I'm glad I brought you down with that. Kind of made you sad about that. This has been great. The one thing I ask every guest is
A moment of joy.
tell me something that gives you great joy.
Having a bowl of pasta in any city in Italy.
Okay. Do you have a favorite city in Italy? No.
You go into any restaurant
Yeah.
and I don't know what they do to the pasta there.
Make it fresh with different kind of wheat.
I don't know what
Yeah.
they do.
They do.
I don't mind. We never go to a fancy restaurant. We always go to a side street, and it's always just fabulous.
We spent some time in Florence recently and had the
Uh-huh.
greatest time. It's just, and Tuscany all around, and it's just unbelievable.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful over there. Don't go in the summer.
Too hot?
Too many people.
Too many people. All right. So that's good. That's a good moment of joy. Is
Yeah.
pasta in Italy? I'm all for it. I've had it. I've experienced it, and I agree completely. Jimmy, thank you for being here.
Here's my ride.
Not yet, hopefully. But thank you for being here, buddy.
I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. It's been a pleasure to be able to sort of work near you, to watch you do stuff, and to gain just wisdom and fun from being around you. And thank you for watching, and watch next time, and write me at dbawjk@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments, and I will see you next time.
Don't be alone.